All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are breaking down one specific argument from one congressional leader on how to end a government shutdown. Now, it's really important to remember we're focusing entirely on this single perspective. We want to understand how they build their case and present it. We're going to walk through it step by step using their own words to see the story they're telling. Okay, let's dive in. So right out of the gate, the speaker asks the one question on pretty much everyone's mind. How does this all end? Their entire argument is built to give a very specific answer to that question. It's presented less like a policy problem and more like a story, with a clear beginning, a conflict, and, in their view, a simple resolution. Okay, so the first piece of their argument is all about setting the stakes. Before they start pointing fingers or offering solutions, they want to make one thing crystal clear. This shutdown is causing real harm. The speaker really paints a picture of things getting worse by the day, saying that the pain is just going to keep growing the longer the government stays closed. They also make a point of saying that, from their perspective, the Trump administration is working hard behind the scenes to try and limit this damage for the American people. And this brings us to the real foundation of their whole argument. The speaker says, flat out, that all of this pain, all of this disruption was entirely avoidable. You see, that statement is crucial because it immediately sets up the next question in their narrative. Well, if it was avoidable, then who's to blame for it? And that leads us right into the second part of their argument, the accusation. So they've established that people are being hurt, and now they move on to assigning blame for the crisis. And they are not subtle about it. According to the speaker, the reason this shutdown is happening is because the Democratic Party presented what they call a shocking binary choice. The argument is that instead of working together to find some common ground, the opposition just forced this all-or-nothing standoff. And there it is. That's the accusation in its most pointed form. The speaker is directly framing this binary choice as a clash between two completely different sets of priorities. As they present it, this is the core conflict. So this slide really just lays out that framing visually. On one side, they put their own priority, keeping the government open for its citizens, and on the other, what they describe as the Democratic priority. By setting it up this way, they're creating what they call a patently absurd choice for the public to look at. All right, on to part 3 of the argument. After they've defined the problem and pointed the finger, the speaker presents their side of the negotiations, what they call the counteroffer. The speaker claims that when they offered a simple, clean bill to fund the government, the Democrats came back and demanded an additional $1.5 trillion in federal spending. And they argue that was just a complete non-starter. And they are absolutely emphatic in rejecting the supposed demand. They make it perfectly clear that adding that much spending just to keep the government's lights on was never, ever going to happen. Now, the legislative tool at the heart of all this is something called a continuing resolution. It's basically just a stopgap measure, a temporary funding bill to keep things running. The speaker is arguing that their proposal was a really simple, clean version of one of these with no extra stuff attached. And to really hammer this point home, the speaker highlights just how simple their proposed bill is. It's only 24 pages. That number, 24, is being used as a kind of evidence to show how straightforward and uncomplicated their solution is. And here are the key features of that bill as they lay them out. It's short, it's clean of any extra spending, and it just funds the government at its current levels. But here's the real kicker. They also claim it's super similar to a bill that Democrats, including Chuck Schumer, had supported just a few months earlier. So they're framing it as a totally reasonable, even bipartisan offer. Then the speaker poses this question, literally holding up the bill for everyone to see. It's a rhetorical challenge, right? They're asking the audience just look at this simple 24-page document and decide for themselves if it really seems like a partisan trick. Okay, so this all leads to the final part of their argument, the path forward. If the problem is this supposed binary choice, and their offer is presented as being so simple, then what's the solution? How does this end, according to them? And here it is. The speaker lays out a super direct 3-step process. In their view, the shutdown could be over today. Step 1, Senate Democrats just need to take up the bill that's already passed the House. Step 2, the Senate votes for it. Step 3, send it to the president who they say will sign it. Done. But hold on. If the solution is that simple, you have to ask, why hasn't it happened? Well, the speaker has one final accusation. They argue that this whole standoff isn't actually about policy at all. It's about something else entirely. And this is the final thought they leave the audience with, that the whole point of the shutdown, from their perspective of the opposition, is just to send a message. And they argue that if this message comes at the cost of hurting American citizens, well, then that's a price the other side is willing to pay. And that leaves us with the final question, the one that's just kind of hanging in the air after their argument. If a high-stakes political battle like this is really all about sending a message, what exactly is that message, and who is it for? That's definitely something to think about.